Be still and know that I am God, Psalm 46:10. Such simple words with a powerful, transformative depth. When we hear these words, we may initially wonder what being still really means. In a world that constantly pushes us to move faster, achieve more, and chase after every fleeting trend, God offers a radically different approach, one that calls us to find peace in His presence. This isn't merely a call to quiet our surroundings or empty our minds. Instead, it's a call to trust, to surrender, and to release control, allowing God to work in and through our lives. Imagine the Creator of the universe, the one who holds the stars in place and sets the waves in motion, asking us to pause and rest in Him. So often, we carry burdens that feel impossible to bear alone: pain, disappointment, fears. Yet God's invitation in this verse reassures us that He sees every detail of our lives. He knows our fears and concerns, and He reminds us that no storm or challenge is too powerful for Him to calm. Be still is His loving reminder that even when life feels like it's spinning out of control, we can find rest in His unchanging nature and steadfast love. He is asking us to let go of our frantic need to control everything and instead find peace in His presence. When we hear the phrase "be still," it's easy to think it simply means to do nothing, to sit in silence, or to disengage from life's demands. But in the context of God's message, being still is an active choice, a choice to surrender and trust Him fully. It's a shift from striving to resting, from constant action to a deeper peace that only He can provide. Imagine a parent holding a frightened child after a nightmare. They don't tell the child to pretend the nightmare didn't happen. Instead, they reassure the child, comforting them with the safety of their presence. This is the kind of peace God offers us. In Isaiah 41:10, God reassures us by saying, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you." These words are more than just comforting. They are a promise from our Creator. He doesn't ask us to handle life on our own or face its hardships in isolation. He is always there, strengthening us, guiding us, and providing everything we need to endure. So, what does it truly mean to know that I am God? This knowledge is not just about recognizing that God exists. It's about understanding who He is and what His character reveals about Him. Knowing God is more than simply having intellectual knowledge about Him. It's about experiencing His love, faithfulness, and mercy personally and deeply. When we come to know God, it means we trust in His sovereignty, His wisdom, and His goodness even when life's circumstances don't make sense. In Proverbs 3:5-6, we are instructed, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." This isn't always easy, because trusting God requires us to let go of our need to control and understand everything. It requires a shift in perspective, from focusing on our limited understanding to embracing God's infinite wisdom. There's immense power in letting go of our need for control and releasing everything into God's hands. When we stop trying to force solutions, micromanage outcomes, or make everything happen on our own, we create space in our lives for God's peace to fill us. This peace is not something we can manufacture on our own. It's a gift that comes from a deep trust in God's goodness and sovereignty. Philippians 4:6-7 tells us, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Notice that the peace God offers us is beyond human understanding. It's a peace that remains even when circumstances don't improve right away. When we are tempted to worry, to stress, or to hold on to every detail of our lives, God asks us instead to come to Him with our concerns. He doesn't ignore our struggles. He meets us in them, offering a peace that sustains us through the storm. True peace isn't about having a perfect, problem-free life. It's about finding rest in the assurance that God is with us no matter what we face. By releasing control and choosing to trust in His plan, we are no longer bound by anxiety or fear. Instead, we experience His calm presence, protecting our hearts and minds. Picture the biggest worry you have right now. Maybe it's a financial burden, a strained relationship, a health issue, or an uncertain future. Now, imagine taking that burden and laying it down at the feet of God, releasing it from your hands and trusting Him to handle it. This is exactly what God invites us to do. 1 Peter 5:7 encourages us, "Cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you." God understands the weight we carry. He sees the burdens we bear. He knows our fears, doubts, and insecurities, and He lovingly invites us to cast these worries on Him. Not because they're insignificant, but because He cares deeply about every detail of our lives. Being still doesn't mean ignoring or denying life's challenges. Instead, it means acknowledging that God's power is greater than any obstacle we face. It's a conscious choice to trust that He is capable of handling our problems better than we ever could on our own. Imagine how freeing it would be to live without the weight of constant worry, knowing that God Himself is carrying our burdens. This is the peace He promises us. When we surrender our anxieties to Him, we find rest and assurance in His loving care. We discover that in His hands, our worries lose their power, and we gain a deeper confidence in His protection and provision. Sometimes the hardest part of trusting God is when our prayers seem to go unanswered. We may wonder if God is truly listening or if He's aware of what we're going through. It's in these moments that being still requires even more faith. God never promised us a life without difficulties, but He did promise to be with us through every trial. Isaiah 43:2 reassures us, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned." Notice how God doesn't say, "if you pass through," but when. This means hardships are a part of life, but we are not alone in them. God's presence accompanies us, sustaining and protecting us even in our darkest hours. Being still doesn't mean being passive. It's an active form of faith, where we choose to believe that God is at work behind the scenes, orchestrating everything for our good. We may not understand His timing or His ways, but we can trust His heart. Sometimes His no, or not yet, is preparing us for something far greater than we can imagine. In those seasons of waiting and wondering, let us find comfort in knowing that God is not distant or silent. He is closer than ever, guiding us through each step and teaching us the beauty of patience and trust. Our natural response to life's challenges is often to fight, fix, or flee. But God calls us to respond differently, by being still and knowing He is God. This goes against our human instincts, especially when we feel we must do something to improve our situation. Yet God's wisdom is higher than ours. He sees what we cannot see and knows what we do not know. Romans 8:28 assures us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to his purpose. This verse doesn't promise that all things will be easy, but it promises that all things, even the painful or confusing moments, are working together for our ultimate good. When we allow ourselves to be still, we're essentially telling God, I trust that you're doing something good here, even if I don't understand it yet. In times of pain or loss, it's natural to feel as though we're drowning in sorrow. The psalmist David experienced this and frequently cried out to God in his distress. In Psalm 34:18 he wrote, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." This verse reminds us that God's presence is especially near in our moments of despair. When our hearts are broken, God doesn't stand afar. He draws close, offering comfort and healing. Being still in our sorrow means acknowledging our pain without trying to rush the healing process. It means giving ourselves permission to grieve while trusting that God is holding us. Our tears are precious to Him. He sees every single one. Sometimes the healing we need can only come through surrender, when we let go of our need to understand and simply lean into God's comforting embrace. When we look at the life of Jesus, we see a beautiful example of being still in the midst of overwhelming situations. Even in his most agonizing moments, Jesus knew the importance of retreating to be with his Father. Before facing the cross, he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, surrendering his will to God. In Matthew 26:39, Jesus prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Here we see Jesus acknowledging his own suffering and fear, but choosing to be still in the Father's plan. Jesus teaches us that being still doesn't mean we won't feel pain or uncertainty. It means choosing to trust God's will above our own desires and fears. In those quiet, surrendered moments, we align ourselves with God's purposes, even if they involve sacrifice or hardship. Jesus' example shows us that there is peace in surrender and strength in trusting God's plan. When we follow his example, we open ourselves up to the same divine strength and peace that sustained Jesus. God's call to be still isn't just about inner peace. It's also about discovering our identity in him. The world often pressures us to define ourselves by what we achieve, what we have, or what others think of us. But God calls us to rest in who he says we are, his beloved children. In 1 John 3:1 we read, "See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God." This identity isn't something we have to earn. It's a gift given to us by grace. When we are still, we make room to listen to God's voice, which reminds us that we are loved, chosen, and treasured. We begin to see ourselves not through the world's standards, but through his eyes. Our worth doesn't depend on our accomplishments or the approval of others, but on his unchanging love for us. In this stillness, we find the security and freedom that come from knowing we are his. We are freed from the need to constantly prove ourselves, because we know that our value is already secured in him. This understanding transforms how we approach life, enabling us to live with a deeper sense of peace and purpose, grounded in our true identity as children of God. In our journey of faith, being still allows us to be more sensitive to God's guidance. When we quiet our hearts and minds, we create space for the Holy Spirit to speak. Often, God's direction comes as a gentle whisper, a nudge, or a sense of peace about a decision. Proverbs 3:5-6 tells us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." This guidance requires us to let go of our need for control and to rely on God's wisdom. Being still helps us hear His voice over the noise of our fears and anxieties. As we trust Him, He lights our path step by step, even when the journey ahead seems unclear. By learning to be still, we can navigate life with a quiet confidence. Being still is also about remembering God's faithfulness in our lives. When we pause to reflect, we see countless times when God has come through for us, often in ways we didn't expect. Lamentations 3:22-23 tells us, "Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." Each day is a testament to God's love and mercy. By being still, we take time to count our blessings and to remember His faithfulness. This reflection strengthens our trust in Him, knowing that the God who has been faithful before will be faithful again. Gratitude becomes a powerful expression of stillness, reminding us of all the ways God has been present in our lives. In the fast-paced world we live in, being still with God can feel challenging. Yet, carving out this time is essential for our spiritual growth. Jesus modeled this for us by regularly retreating to pray and spend time with the Father, even when He was busy with ministry. Mark 1:35 says, "Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where He prayed." If Jesus needed this time to be still, how much more do we? In those quiet moments, we draw closer to God and are refreshed in His presence. Our souls are renewed, our minds are calmed, and we gain clarity. Spending time with God in stillness strengthens us for the demands of life, enabling us to approach each day with peace and purpose. Stillness before God is a place of renewal and transformation. It's where we come face to face with our true selves and with God's unchanging love. In this quiet place, God works in our hearts, shaping and refining us. As Romans 12:2 encourages, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." In stillness, God transforms our minds, changing our perspectives and filling us with His thoughts. This transformation is a lifelong process, one that requires us to regularly pause and be still. Each moment spent in God's presence brings healing, wisdom, and growth. We leave these moments more like Christ, equipped to be His light in the world. Stillness is not a passive act. It's an invitation for God to mold us, to break down the lies we believe, and to build us up with His truth. As we learn to be still, we realize that our relationship with God becomes more intimate and fulfilling. Psalm 27:4 beautifully expresses this desire. "One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek Him in His temple." Stillness opens our hearts to experience God's presence more deeply, allowing us to gaze upon His beauty and to rest in His love. In these quiet moments, we are reminded of His glory, His kindness, and His sovereignty. We find ourselves falling more in love with God, not because of what He does for us, but because of who He is. This deepening relationship brings us lasting joy and fulfillment that the world cannot offer. We are no longer just followers. We become friends of God, walking closely with Him each day, filled with His peace and strength. So let us embrace the beauty of stillness. Let's trust God with all our hearts and lean not on our own understanding. Let's surrender our worries, release our fears, and rest in the knowledge that He is God. In our stillness, we find strength. In our surrender, we find peace. God is not distant. He is with us, loving us and working on our behalf. We don't have to have all the answers. We only need to trust in the one who holds all things together. Each time we choose stillness, we deepen our faith, grow in love, and find a joy that cannot be taken from us. We become a testimony of God's faithfulness, a light to those around us, showing them the beauty of a life anchored in Him. In the storms of life, remember God's invitation to be still and know that I am God. Embrace His presence, trust His timing, and let His peace fill your heart. His love for you is steadfast and unchanging, and His plans are always good. Take a moment today to pause, to be still, and to listen to His voice. Let go of your worries and let Him lead you. God is with you, and He will never let you go. If you've been encouraged by this message, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspirational content. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of God's love. And remember, no matter what you're going through, God is by your side. Shalom.